All right, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, this is Christian Sadler. I am CEO of Pre-iShare and just an overall real estate nerd. I love real estate, whether it's investing, whether it's traditional real estate, and or commercial real estate in the space of raising capital. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thank you for being here. And you've got a story to tell us. Where in the world does this story that you're going to share begin?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a story of my beginnings as an entrepreneur. So it's in Utah, but it also spans Arizona and Chicago and other places as well.
And what happened? Dive in deep.
Well, so here's the thing. The core principle behind it that I learned is that there is no right decision per se. You make a decision and then you make it right. And I had to learn this concept over time as I went from, growing up, I had only known working class folks, people that worked a job and they essentially were given what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. And so when I decided to become an entrepreneur, I mean, I was young. I was 17, 18 years old when I was going to seminars trying to learn how to get into real estate investing. And finally, in my early 20s, I found some mentors and I got into that process. But it wasn't an easy road, I'll tell you that. I went through some really difficult times. I mean, I remember specifically in the very beginning, I just didn't really know how to operate my time. And so I was doing a lot of things internally, and that internal work was important, but I wasn't taking the specific actions, what we call money making activities. And so I went from great credit, healthy income, all of these things, to having essentially zero income. I quit my job way too early, just with this ego-based, scenario where I actually had a coworker that he bet me that I wouldn't be able to make this business work. And so I was like, I'm going to walk away from this job by January, 1st, and I'm going to prove you wrong. Well, that was probably the wrong energy to bring to that. But needless to say, it threw me in the water. And, speaking of throwing me in the water, I often use the analogy of the same way that I learned how to swim. So when I was young, I went to a community pool. It was actually at a high school, and I mean, I don't know how young I was exactly, but if you can imagine, the deep end was just this big scary place. I had never swam without having, being able to touch the sides. And after all is said and done, they blew the whistles, everybody went away. I had forgot something on the other side of the pool. So I went walking to the other side of the pool, and there was what we call a big kid, right? So I was, probably second grade or something, and there was a big kid that was probably sixth or seventh grade. It was just me and him, and he pushed me into the pool. And I mean, you hear about all these cases nowadays of kids drowning. Well, something about that moment forced me to figure it out, and I swam. And this is kind of what I felt like. And by the way, after that, I was never afraid of swimming again. From that point forward, I always, could dive and do all those things and swim and be just fine. That's kind of how business was for me, except it was a little bit more turbulent. I imagine more so it was like I got thrown in a swift moving river. And I'm sitting here trying to figure out what are these money making activities and what are the different mindsets that I need to adopt? What are the books that I should be reading? And I gained all that by putting myself into the pool, so to speak, and jumping in. But there was a period of time there where, quite frankly, I was drowning. I was in a position where I mean, I've dealt with thoughts of suicide my entire life since I was a little kid, and so I just thought that I was such a failure. And I had to make a decision of, do I feed my dog? Because I had an amazing dog, right? Or do I feed myself? And I always chose, to feed that dog. And I was in that place. I was deep into that place where it was like there was nothing left. Like I was pawning, what little belongings that I had. And there was this um conference, this event, and it was over in Arizona. And I didn't have the money to get there. I didn't know where I was going to be staying. And um I had went with a mentor of mine. We had decided to go up and just sit by the fire. Now, he didn't know how bad I was struggling. But as we were sitting there by the fire, he asked me the question. He said, "Hey, are you going to this event?" And I said, and this is where the decision came in, is because I didn't know. I didn't think I could. I said, yes. I don't know how yet, but yes. And he said, "Well, if you figure out your way there, I'll pay for your ticket." And that was that decision, and I got there, and I had been working towards this certain, position within the company where I could start receiving larger commissions. We're talking like, 5-figure commissions, and at that time, that meant the world to me, right? To go make a $10,000 check was a pretty big deal. While I was at that event, I wasn't doing anything specific to, those activities. It was everything that had been building up to that point. And so I think there's first of all making a decision and then making that decision right. There's the law of activity. So when you're focused on a specific goal, a specific outcome, and you're moving towards it, but then there's a certain law that I find is very valuable, which is that law of surrender, of release. And so while I was at this event, I wasn't thinking about all the people that I had going to, meetings back at home, so to speak, right? People that were showing up and conversations that I had. Well, while I was at this event, and it was a week-long event, by the way. So it was like I was just gone and I was tuned in and I was focused on what's going on there. I had a couple of sales that came in that put me over that level. I had made $10,000 the within a week of being back from that trip. And it was one of those things where it was like I realized that by making that decision and saying yes to it, it gave me that opportunity to keep showing up. And by the way, some of the relationships that I made at that event were some of the core relationships that propelled me forward, continuing in business. And this has happened multiple times. I could share, multiple scenarios, multiple events that I've went to, multiple businesses that I've chosen into, even though nothing from on paper made sense for me to go into this. Even recently of stepping into building pre-iShare. At the time that this opportunity came across my desk, I had just got my real estate license. I'd been investing for years, never got my license, and 6 figures right out of the gate. First year with my license, I knew that I could lock in and I could probably comfortably clear $300,000 to $500,000 a year as an agent. I was enjoying what I was doing. I was having a ton of fun with it. But this opportunity showed up where I had somebody that stepped in as a mentor to me. And I could see that. I could see the opportunity of being able to work with somebody that's done literally $7 billion worth of real estate in their career. And so when everything said I should focus on this one thing that is paying me right now, especially because this is a few years ago, and this was after I got out of a really, really toxic, difficult relationship. I had let a lot of my business go by the wayside. I hadn't been showing up for, many of my relationships. So I was in like this rebuild mode. I was, when people talk about starting at zero, I wished I could start at zero at that point in time in my life. I was so far in the hole. And by shifting and no longer trying to force something that wasn't working, which is another principle, by the way. Every time you try to force God's will or the universe, whatever you guys want, whatever you guys call it, it's so interesting how difficult life can be. And then when you choose into realizing that there's a bigger force out there, that if you just make your choice, make your decision, and then allow that cooperation with the universe, oh man, things just get so much easier and simpler and more free flowing.
Is that the main difference between, because you've set up a nice dichotomy between the first experience where you left your job a little bit too quickly, you said, and you did it on a bet, and then this, because the stories sound almost identical, right? But the difference between them seems to be this energetic change, the way that you were going about it. Can you tell me a little bit more about the differences between those two things?
Yeah, I would have to agree with you that that is the change. When I make the decision and I say this is going to be what it looks like, this is going to be every aspect of it, I'm going to, and I try to spell out every detail of what my future looks like, it seems like it always becomes pretty difficult for me. But when I say this is the general picture, this is the vision, what I'm going for, when I, meditate on just the general feeling of where I'm going, but I don't have it all laid out in front of me. And I don't say it has to be this way or that way. I allow, it to go which way that it chooses to go, so to speak. And my life becomes so much more simpler. And quite frankly, the results come in a lot higher fashion. I mean, I can think of another scenario where I was just dream building one day, and I was out there searching the internet for land somewhere that I would want a future estate. I wasn't in a position to, buy or build an estate, but I found 100 acres of land here in Utah, out in Summit County, Utah, which I don't know if you guys know Utah, but that's like where Park City is. You think about really nice area, right? But this was up in the mountains overlooking a lake. And sure enough, by that dream building process, and then I dove a little bit deeper and I got some more information. I made an offer. For a long time, that was my most profitable project ever, and it was never supposed to be an investment. I ended up selling that. It was about an 18-month project, and I made a six-figure profit twice on that same piece of property that I bought.
And it was in this process of dream building. Tell me a little bit more about dream building, right? Because I am a ruthless goal setter. Very systematic about like I got my Notion board and I've got my core goals. I've got them organized into four different F's, right? Family, fitness, freedom, and finance.
Yep.
And underneath each of those goals is a battle plan to get to each one. That's how that's just how I've operated for years. And I have also hit massive amounts of resistance in just about every area of those goals. And so I want you to teach me and the listeners a little bit about the energetics of dream building and how you would maybe approach it differently if you keep running into these I mean it sounds like you're setting goals when you're talking about how you used to do it, or maybe I'm off, right? Instruct me.
No, no, no. I mean, and here's the thing. Everything that you just said, I do the same thing. I love all of that, right? So spell it out, spend time like mapping it out. What is that? Yeah, faith, goal, family, fitness,
Finance, you
wherever it is
nailed it.
that's
Yeah.
important to you, right?
Yeah.
There is such a power of writing those things down. I mean, here's the other aspect of it though. If you try to make every minute detail happen in a certain way, I think that you're going to be sorely disappointed. And on top of that, if you here's the thing that I learned. So I used to going back to that. So that was that deal. By the way, it was the first time I ever made six figures on a single deal. I used to dream about that. I used to imagine what it would feel like. And when I was young and I guess a little more naive, I used to think that it was going to be this big party and celebration. I was going to invite everybody over. I was going to be giving thank yous to all the people that helped me get there. When I made that first six-figure check, it was just another day. I mean, it was just in the midst of everything that was going on because by the time you grow to the point where you are that person that achieves those goals, it's going to feel natural to you. So you're always going after that next goal. So that's that aspect of it is yes, write down those goals, visualize it, see it. I even think it's very important to build your castles in the sky, but then make sure you build the roadmap of how to get there, but just understand that it's going to shift, it's going to move. And what don't get so focused on the path that you're on so much as the destination that you're moving to.
Hmm. Your your deal that you made the six figures on. Uh, I I mean you're deeply involved in sales, right? These are deals, so there's a selling element to it. And there's two sides. The first side is the winning, right? Where you close the deal, you make the money, and life is good. How do you celebrate? First of all, how do you hit the dopamine? Because I know that if I don't celebrate my wins, then they lose their, I don't know, like I lose momentum. They're like the wind that I need in my sails. And so, it's just another day, but also how do you feed your subconscious more of that to keep you going? And then when you fall short, or when the deal doesn't close, or when it's just going in the negative, or you're going to lose money on a deal, or you just don't get it, right? What do you do to keep your motivation and keep your eyes focused on that vision and that feeling for the future?
Yeah, I think that that same mentor that sent me on that trip, right? He's somebody that he came to me and he actually passed away in a plane accident. So I'm thinking about some of the lessons
Wait,
that I learned from him.
well,
Sorry,
he's a big, heavier set guy.
what's that?
What's his name?
His name's Chad Wade.
So I have another friend in Utah who also passed away in flying planes. But that wasn't him. Chad Wade, rest in peace. Sorry about that. Keep going.
No, 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 it's all right. Um, and remind me the question again so I can get my mind back on track.
No, we're just talking about like when you have success, how do you celebrate? Even though it is just another day, how do you hit the dopamine? And then when you fail, how do you recover from that? What's the mindset that you approach it with?
So I'm going to start with the failure portion of it first. Chad taught me a principle. He said, when things are going bad, when I see resistance showing up, I believe that something equal or greater good is coming. So anytime I'm starting to experience challenges, I start looking for the good that's about to arrive. And here's the thing about it, like when I think about it from a logical perspective or like a spiritual perspective. Spiritual perspective is like, that's amazing. It's, yeah, you choose into that truth and that faith, and it's going to show up. But from a logical perspective as well, if you have that mindset and all you're doing is looking for the good because the bad is showing up, you're putting yourself in a mindset of expectation to where you're going to go find that good. You're going to put yourself into the position to have an even greater outcome. So that's what I would say to that. And then, one thing that I could practice a lot more on the winning side and the celebration side is anchoring those emotions. And I did this for a while where I started rebuilding my life recently. Is when I would have a win, I had a certain clap that I would do, right? So that I would do this clap. I lived alone, so nobody thought I was weird walking around doing this clap. But then what I would do is I would do that every time I would get a win. I would do this clap, and then I would go back to that. And I would actually be walking throughout the day, and I would be doing this clap and putting myself back in that energy before I would start making phone calls, before I would start, sit down and go through my emails, and before I would start researching, properties. Is I would put my stand up, I would put myself in that position. I would do the same clap that I did when and it was interesting that that clap came to me naturally in the moment. And I just remembered these principles that I had learned about anchoring, and so I built that into an anchor for myself.
Can you do the clap real quick? Can we see the secret clap? Or is it too much of a secret, closely guarded secret?
Yeah, it's not too much of a secret, but it's not gonna be easy for me to stand up right now.
You are like up and
It's
running and like
literally
it's
like
like a
that.
football like getting hyped clap.
When I'm like, and it was just like a full-on clap where you can feel it in your hands for, 30 to 60 seconds afterwards.
Mm.
That was that anchor.
There's an old Taoist proverb where the I think it actually comes from Buddhism where they talk about the farmer and his horses. And we've talked about it on the show before, right? The One of the best ways that you can approach life is to not get too high, not get too low, and just kind of be interested in what's happening on the journey. I think I want to get your thoughts on one last thing here, and that's when things are going really well. Me and my wife joke, and it's like the calm before the storm. You kind of think like, no, things are really good right now. I wonder what terrible thing is going to happen to us next, right? Like, and I would like to be able to snap myself out of that. And so maybe give me your best advice on how to not anticipate, because here you are when it's bad, quote unquote, you're trying to anticipate the good. But when it's good, how do you keep from anticipating the bad?
Yeah, yeah. So it's about choosing your beliefs. Like, I really believe that we have the opportunity to choose into our beliefs, choose what our beliefs are. And I actually used to date a girl who she had that same feeling, and it was like clockwork. Every time that something started going good, she would find a way to create this, drama, this scenario that it would turn in the opposite direction. And, really it's just choosing. I don't believe in that, right? Like, it's interesting because I believe a lot of positive superstitions, but I refuse to believe almost all negative superstitions. Because I believe it's an energy that you choose into. So if you choose into that energy is going to connect with the universe or God or whatever that is, and it's going to bring that energy back to you. And so when you start thinking those thoughts, I would just reframe it and say, man, things are getting good. I wonder how good they could get.
Christian, where can everyone find you?
I'm real easy to find. If you spell my name correctly, and I'm going to spell it even though I know I don't need to, it's on the screen. Christion. So Christian with an O and Sadler with one D, Sadler. I am so easy to find online if you just look me up that way.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Eric.
This has been the Pulse Ox Podcast. Please, if you found this episode valuable, give us a like on Spotify and share it with a friend.